What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Football Diary, telling you the stories of current and historic NFL. It is a weekday, meaning we are talking about current NFL, but on the weekends, we always make a video about a historical debate or a legendary player bio and talk about their history. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, learning the history of the game or learning about, current stuff in the game, absolutely hit that subscribe button down below. But in this video, we wanted to talk about defensive rookies. We were looking at maybe doing who are the best guys to bet for defensive rookie of the year? And then we just saw one guy and Matt just really liked this. And he thought, you know what, let's just do the video only on him because there's a very good chance he does end up winning defensive rookie of the year. He's very undervalued. That guy would be Kwity Paye out of Michigan, going to the Indianapolis Colts. Now, Matt, do you want to give the rundown on why Kwity Paye is going to win defensive rookie of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I want to talk about just this draft selection. What we've seen is that the Colts, under this new regime, Frank Reich, Chris Ballard, they've been really good. They have made, and one of the podcasts I listened to, they call it, they're just constant double hitters in the draft. They don't swing for crazy talent, they go after guys that they know are going to be instant contributors, and that has worked really well for them. And I think Kwity Paye is a perfect example of that. I thought he could have gone top 10, top 12 pick. Definitely a lot of quarterbacks and wide receivers that kind of pushed him back a little bit. Gets taken, 21, I think, by the Colts.
Yeah.
That's a spectacular value pick, in my opinion. Probably the most pro-ready pass rusher or edge player in the class. Maybe doesn't have the top end of like a Jalen Phillips or, some of these other guys that might, like a couple years down the road, just put up ridiculous sack numbers. But right off the bat, he's probably the top guy or the guy we should expect to have the most production from the edge rusher position from this class. And this is a class where there's not a lot of like top end defensive talent. You kind of look at why people win defensive rookie of the year. And usually there's pretty much three categories that kind of make it that up. Either you have a exorbitant amount of tackles as a linebacker, you have a lot of sacks as a edge rusher or interior defensive lineman, or you're a secondary piece and you get a lot of picks. I don't really see any linebackers or secondary players like dominating this season or like taking off and like being able to win that award. Definitely some good pieces. Caleb Farley, there's guys that could maybe have like an instant impact or like really put up those interception numbers. I would guess that it'll probably go to a pass rusher. And out of all the pass rushers, I think Kwity Paye is by far in the best spot. He's going to be playing next to maybe the most underrated defensive player in the entire league in DeForest Buckner. I bet if there was a poll between, through defensive coaches, I would expect that there's a lot of guys that would have DeForest slated as their third interior defensive lineman. That's very, very impressive. I mean, Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, and you can make the case that Buckner's after that. Also, guys like Fletcher Cox in the discussion. But Buckner is a very special player, and he's going to basically demand a double team inside of Kwity Paye on third down. So that means that Kwity Paye is going to be going one-on-one with tackles all the time. He has the chance to get double-digit sacks this year, and I think that wins him the award.
Yeah, if you're looking at it, Matt, you brought up a couple of things. The first thing you brought up, there's three different ways that people can win the award. Sacks, you get a ton of tackles, or you get a lot of picks. Now, the sacks one, that one's easy. You get the sacks. People don't really care about how good your team is, how good your defense is, seemingly. When it comes to the linebackers getting a lot of tackles, you can't just be a guy that just got a lot of tackles. Your defense has to be really good along with getting a lot of tackles. And a secondary piece that gets a lot of interceptions. You can't just be on a marginal secondary. Like, you got to be like, oh, wow, this guy really transcended the defense. And the pass rush position is the one that transcends the defense the easiest as that single player. If you're going to come in, getting a sack is going to do a lot more for your defense by getting a lot of sacks than it is for getting a lot of picks in terms of overall defensive rankings and things like that. Like, it's an absolute game wrecker. You talked about DeForest Buckner, potentially being the third best defensive tackle in the NFL. I'm going to disagree with you. Number two. I have him as number two. I think he's better than Chris Jones, better than Fletcher Cox. He's nowhere near Aaron Donald, but I got him at number two. He is an absolute game wrecker. That's a perfect way of describing him. He's completely underrated. I think he's the most underrated player in the NFL. I mean, there isn't a guy that affects the game as much as him, because everybody talks about this Colts defense and they're like, wow, they're so good. Why? Darius Leonard. That's what I'm sure Colts fans, if Colts fans are watching this, you'll be like, oh no, we know Darius Leonard and he's paired with, obviously the great DeForest Buckner. But outside of him, you watch ESPN, you watch Fox Sports or whatever, they're like, oh, Darius Leonard just completely carries this defense. It's like DeForest Buckner is there. DeForest Buckner is a massive impact on this defense. It is almost impossible to run the ball against this team, not because Darius Leonard is everywhere. It helps that he's very good and he can get sideline to sideline, but DeForest Buckner ruins the inside. He commands those double teams. He commands triple teams. And that allows the edge rushers, guys like Justin Houston that they've had, to get in, get sacks, and be a dominant defense. And that's something that you're going to look at Kwity Paye. It's almost guaranteed that Justin Houston will not be back in Indianapolis. He's yet to sign anywhere. I highly doubt that he's going to be back in Indianapolis. It is technically still possible. I just don't think it's going to happen because they did end up drafting Kwity Paye. And if you want to look at Justin Houston's stats over the last couple of years in Indianapolis, last year in 2020, he played in 16 games. And keep in mind, this isn't 2014 Justin Houston that had 22 sacks in a season. This is a much older Justin Houston he was 31, 32 years old doing this. 8 sacks in 2020, 11 sacks in 2019. That's what he's done since he's come to Indianapolis, or since he came to Indianapolis. He was very good for them. He's very undervalued in this free agency class. That's why I think he's not there. But, overall, they're expecting Kwity Paye to come in and fill that void. And Matt, you talked about how Kwity Paye is probably the most pro-ready, edge rusher, pro-ready pass rusher in this draft. I would absolutely agree. I did a ton of scouting. If you can see, Ravens jerseys behind me. Love the Ravens. Ravens needed an edge rusher, so I had to look into all of the edge rushers. I did a ton of scouting and a ton of analysis, and Kwity Paye is by far the most pro-ready edge rusher in this draft. That's why I expected him to be the first edge rusher taken. I know a lot of people really like Jalen Phillips. However, I thought that Kwity Paye, as far as just coming to the league, being able to dominate, he's going to be the guy that's most likely to be able to do that. And then you add in the fact that he's next to not only DeForest Buckner, an absolute game record, but he's also got some very good pieces around him as well, in Darius Leonard. And even on the outside, having a lockdown corner is very helpful. And the Colts absolutely do have that in Xavier Rhodes. I'm a big fan of Bobby Okereke. I'm a Stanford fan. I like Bobby Okereke, legendary draft selection by McAfee. But overall, Kwity Paye is going to come in and not only be a pretty solid edge rusher, in my opinion, but he is a guy that is a very underrated asset in terms of having the ability to play anywhere on the defensive line. It's an asset that J.J. Watt gets zero credit for from the national media. Football coaches, general managers, they understand how important this is. But being able to play on every spot on the defensive line allows him to just wreck the game in that many more ways. And still being able to do that next to DeForest Buckner is an absolute asset. And this Colts defense was very good last year. I expect it to be very good once again. And if you're on a very good defense and you are an edge rusher and you're putting up good sacks, because Buckner's not a guy that's going to get you a ton of sacks, but he's going to allow everybody else. Now, look at the last rookie pass rusher that was drafted with DeForest Buckner on the team. Matt, can you remind me who that guy was? And did he win? Did he absolutely slaughter the Defensive Rookie of the Year race?
Yeah, he did, and I'm still sad that Buckner's gone. I'm a Niners fan, for anyone that doesn't know that. The Buckner trade, I understand why they did it, but the fact that D Ford is making Buckner's money, that hurts, dude. That hurts so bad. You had potentially Buck and Bosa in that defensive line. That was ridiculous. So that's the frustrating part. I love DeForest Buckner. He's always been one of my favorite players. Really, really good player, and he just does not get talked about enough. So I think that's gonna be a sweet thing for this defense. Sweet thing for Kwity Paye, plus 1,000. Make sure you put some money on that. That's a nice pick right there. Also, you brought up Xavier Rhodes. I just want to mention one thing. I think a lot of people thought that he was kind of done, lost a few steps. Maybe he's lost a step. That dude is an absolute technician, and he is really good for this Colts defense, and we saw that last year. I think we'll continue to see that. Maybe Rock Ya-Sin continues to develop, and he becomes a better piece on the outside as well. And this Colts defense is very formidable for one, but they're going to be good. And what their offense is going to do is they're going to try to kill the clock. So you're going to see a lot of late game situations where teams are trying to come back on the Colts, and that just makes the Kwity Paye pick even better. So go bet Kwity Paye for Defensive Rookie of the Year, because that plus 1,000 won't be here a month into the year, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And just kind of final thing to add on my part would be, if you want to look at the history of the Defensive Rookie of the Year, especially recently, let's look at the past winners. Chase Young, edge rusher, came into a great situation with a great defensive line. Nick Bosa, Edge rusher, came into a great situation with a great defensive line. Colts fans, you know this. Darius Leonard, just an absolute beast. Marshawn Lattimore, absolute beast. Joey Bosa came in, paired with Melvin Ingram, good defensive player, was able to win. Then it's Marcus Peters on the Chiefs. Then it's Aaron Donald. Then it's Sheldon Richardson. Like, that's a lot more pass rushers than non-pass rushers, because at the pass rush position, it's much easier. Like, if you're a cornerback and you got to come in and then you're thrown out there and, you know, you see a game where it's like, oh yeah, this cornerback was drafted. He went against DeAndre Hopkins and Hop had 280 yards on him. I guess that guy can't win Rookie of the Year. Oh no. Or, hey, you know, for example, Patrick Queen. A lot of Rams fans thought that he should win Defensive Rookie of the Year. I was not one of those guys. Should not have been in that conversation. He comes in. He matches up against Travis Kelce. Absolutely slaughtered by Travis Kelce. It looked like Patrick Queen had never played a game of football when he was lining up against Travis Kelce. Like, it is so much harder to do that, whereas people don't recognize when a guy doesn't get sacks in a game, they don't recognize that they were dominated by Trent Williams or whatever offensive tackle they went against. Nobody recognizes it, but they recognize it when their fantasy tight end absolutely murdered the opposing linebacker, or the wide receiver murdered the opposing secondary player. And that's why it's way harder to win, because like, we remember how good Marshawn Lattimore was. Like, it was like, oh my gosh, he locked up Mike Evans again. Oh gosh, how did he do that? He locked up Julio Jones. Oh my goodness. Like, it was like, wow, this guy's coming and done that. It's so hard to do that. But nobody talks about, oh wow. You know, for example, I can't even think of an example where I'm just like, oh wow, Nick Bosa just didn't do anything. Like, nobody talked about that. They only talked about when he dominated. So that's the biggest thing, is like, nobody recognizes. I'll
add something to that. That's because there wasn't a game where Nick Bosa was just
that's
dominated. But I think you're right though. Like, even if Kwity Paye has a game where it's like, oh yeah, this tackle is abusing Kwity Paye, it's like, yeah, but he led the rookies in sacks, so he'll get the award. Yeah. And like I said, it's not like there's some like crazy, at least in my opinion, I don't think there's some guy that's just like gonna run away with it. Last year, there was definitely a guy that was gonna run away with it, and I bet Chase Young like partway through the season at plus 200. And I was like, how was Chase Young plus 200? It was the week after Jeremy. I believe it was after Chin had like. Yeah, he had like three touchdowns, or what was it? 2 touchdowns? Yeah. And it was like, oh my God, look, or maybe he had 3 touchdowns on the year at that point.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's gonna win. It's like, nah, he's a secondary piece. Chase Young's gonna carry this defense to the playoffs. So that, I don't know, that was an obvious one to me as well. But I do like plus 1,000, because it's not even like it's like, oh, you're betting this guy minus 200 or whatever. Like, no, it's like you have a big advantage. So love the Kwity Paye pick.
Absolutely. If you want us to do other videos like this on other rookies and things like that and rookie expectations, we'd love to absolutely do it. Comment your thoughts and opinions. Comment other videos that you want us to do, because we want to talk about what you want to hear about. We have a couple videos coming out very soon talking about things that were commented, whether it was on our TikTok, whether it was on, you know, our YouTube videos, saying like, hey, can you do this? For example, on our Carolina Panthers video, somebody was like, hey, can you do a kind of a Sam Darnold, like full insight on what he can really be. And we're absolutely going to do that. Somebody on the TikTok commented, this is probably going to be tomorrow's video on the weekend, but like Walter Payton versus Barry Sanders, and talk about that. Like, we want to talk about that stuff because you want to listen to it. We don't want to talk about the same thing everybody else talks about. Thank you all for watching. Comment what you want us to talk about, and we will see all of you again.